Hey, all you cool cats and kittens, it's your favorite history teacher back at you again with another historical video. Today, we're going to be talking more about World War I and how the war started to end. So, let me share my screen. All right, winning the war. So, chapter 11, section 3, World War I, winning the war. Is there a real winner? Let's find out. Okay, that was your warm-up. One question, pretty simple. Okay, so our objectives, we're going to analyze the aspects that contribute to a total war. We're going to discuss how the morale of the Allies declined. We're going to learn how the U.S. was brought into World War I and learn how World War I ended. So where we at, Doe? We still here, we out in Europe. So this is Germany in yellow, Austria-Hungary, Bulgaria, Ottoman Empire. The Central Powers, the Allied powers are in green. Great Britain, France, Italy, Russia, those are the big ones. Portugal, Serbia, Greece, Romania, Montenegro. All right, so total war. So what is a total war? It is the modern mechanized war that required the channeling of a nation's entire resources into the war effort. So in order to achieve this, governments took a stronger role in directing the economic and cultural lives of their people. Early on, both sides set up systems to recruit, arm, transport, and supply armies that were in the millions. All warring nations, except Britain, used conscription, which is also known as the draft, which required all young men to be ready for military or other service. Another aspect of total war is governments raised taxes and borrowed huge amounts of money to pay for the cost of war, because we all know wars cost money. If you don't know, wars cost money. It's not like you can just be like, oh, here's money for the war. No, it can't be done that way. They also used rationing of food and other products from boots to gasoline, so limiting the availability of is rationing. They also introduced other economic controls like setting prices, so prices would kind of remain the same and they wouldn't go up or down, and forbidding strikes. So if workers who are working in factories building war materials, they can't go on strike because they want, the better pay, the better hours, and the shorter workday. And if they don't get one of those, they're going to go on strike. No, governments kind of forbade people going on strike. So this is kind of a total war, right? And that is a test question. What is a total war? And when I think total war, I think of crush and squirt. Totally. Yeah. The EAC did. All right. Unrestricted submarine warfare. Like I said, anything you see underlined or in lecture is going to be on your final as well. It's also on your test. Don't know if we're still having a final. We'll see. So at the beginning of the war, Britain's Navy formed a blockade in the North Sea to keep ships from carrying supplies to and from Germany. International law allowed wartime blockades in order to confiscate contraband and military supplies, raw materials to make military supplies, but not items like food or clothes. But the British stopped both types of shipments reaching Germany, so they went a little extra hard So Germans and Austrians are going to suffer. It's called the turnip winter because their potato crop failed. So they didn't really get to turn up, if you know what I'm saying. Total dad joke. Anyways, so to retaliate, Germans used their U-boats that we learned yesterday, their Unterseeboot, or submarines, right, to create their own blockade. They declared in 1915 that they would sink any ships carrying goods to Britain. May 1915, a German submarine torpedoed the British ship, the Lusitania, and almost all 1,200 passengers died, including 128 Americans. Germany had thought the ship was carrying weapons. Woodrow Wilson, the president of the United States at the time, threatened to cut diplomatic ties with Germany. Then Germany decided to restrict their submarine warfare. So now, after the Lusitania, Germany would have their U-boats surface, allowing neutral passengers to get into rescue boats and get off the ship, and then they would blow the ship up. So, yeah, that's how they did it. Lusitania, this is part of a test question. You can almost guess it has something to do with America. Why did I sing like that? Okay, this is a German U-boat in World War I. And this is a British submarine. So you have World War I. It was only about 64 meters long. In here, in 2010, it was 97 meters. The growth of and development of submarines has gone extremely improved. Okay, this is New York Times. Lusitania sunk by submarine, probably 1260 dead, twice torpedoed off Irish coast, sinks in 15 minutes. Captain Turner saved, Froman and Vanderbilt missing. Washington believes that a grave crisis is at hand. That was the New York Times. This is the Lusitania sinking. It almost looks like the Titanic. So when you look up the Titanic image and you look up the Lusitania, these kind of look the same. But they're not. Okay. Another part of propaganda. So going back to total war, you know how I said governments tax, governments borrow money, governments set prices, forbid strikes, using all their natural resources to make war materials. Propaganda is another aspect of total war, controlling public opinion. So in democratic countries, they set up these special boards that would censor the press, okay? They aimed to keep casualty figures and other discouraging news from the public, because if the public knows how many people are dying each day, the morale of the country, the morale of the people is going to plummet, and they're going to call for get out of the war, then lose support for the war. They also restricted popular literature, historical writings, motion pictures, and the arts. And both sides, again, are going to wage a propaganda war. And propaganda, if you don't know what that is a spread of ideas to promote or cause or damage an opposing cause. So most use it to motivate military conscription, especially in Great Britain. France and Germany will use it to urge civilians to loan money to the government, called bonds. Later, Allied propaganda played up the brutality of the German invasion of Belgium. I'm not calling them nice guys. Britain and France press will circulate these tales of atrocities. Some happened. Many were over-exaggerations or just flat out made up. So here you got, I believe this is some Italian propaganda. For the liberty and civility, or civilians, I don't know what civiltà means, of the world. This is Italian. Food for France. You have a soldier and a woman feeding him, probably a nurse. Britons wants you. Join your country's army. God save the king. Will you fight now or wait for this? And here you have, these are the German hats that they wear. And they're attacking a farm, it looks like. Remember Belgium, enlist today. Remember they were provoked into the war, right? Remember them, they were neutral. And then Germany said, no, you're not. National service, defend your island from the grimmest menace that ever threatened it. Every man from 18 to 61 should enroll today. Again, this is for English or Great British, because that's the United Kingdom flag. Who's absent? Is it you? A lot of pointing, people. Hey, women, how do you feel? So women, hey, we get to talk about you. They also played a critical part in the war. As men went off to fight, women took over their jobs to keep the national economies going. This is much more in Europe. It also occurred here in the U.S., of course, but also in Europe. Many worked in war industries, manufacturing weapons and supplies. Others joined women's branches of the armed forces. Nurses, in turn, shared the dangers of the men who they would tend to the wounded. Nurses often worked around the clock, especially after a big push brought many casualties from the front lines. War work gave women a new sense of pride and confidence. So after the war, they had to give up their jobs to the men returning, but they then will challenge the ideas that women can handle the demanding and dangerous jobs that they were asked to partake in once their husbands left. Like, you imagine there's a mass exodus of young people, 18 to 61, and they all leave, and there's this void, there's this gap that you got to fill. So women are going to go to work. So women who have been working for 3-4 years in the same job, they're like, hey, women can do this too. It's not just a man's world. It's not a man's job. Okay. So in Great Britain, Germany, and the US, women's support for the war led them to get their right to vote. And that is key. Women getting the right to vote, especially here in America. Here you have it's not really propaganda, it's just a poster advertising, join the Red Cross, it serves humanity, nurses. Morale in the dumps, so it's low. So despite the inspirational propaganda, morale of the troops and troops and civilians had plunged. Germany began sending as young as 15-year-old recruits to the front line. So basically every guy in this class, you're going to war. Britain was nearly bankrupt. There were long casualty lists. There were food shortages, and failure of generals to win promised victories led for people and governments to call for peace. As morale collapsed, there were some mutinous French troops mutinying, meaning going to, revolting against their superiors. In Italy, many soldiers deserted. No, they did not eat tiramisu, they just left. And in Russia, soldiers left the front to join a full-scale revolution at home. So revolution going on in Mother Russia. So after 3 years of fighting, the war had hit Russia especially hard. There were stories of incompetent generals and corruption wore down the public confidence. So in March 1917, there were bread riots in St. Petersburg that turned into a revolution that brought the Russian monarchy down. And more on that later. So at first, the Allies actually welcomed the overthrow of the Tsar. They hoped Russia would institute some democratic ideas and they would in turn become a stronger ally. But later that year, Vladimir Lenin came to power with a promise to pull Russian troops out of the war. So early 1918, Lenin signed the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, which with Germany, and it ended Russian participation in World War I. That is on your final. That is on your test. And yeah, so Russia had to gain all their land claims in Eastern Europe, i.e. Poland. And it had an immediate impact because now Germany could focus solely on the Western Front. In 1918, the Central Powers stood ready to achieve a breakthrough they had waited so long to get. Here's Vladimir Lenin. More on that later. Just know this face. So America before the war. Many Americans supported the Allies because of cultural ties. They shared a culture and language with Britain, and they sympathized with France because France, a lot of battles were happening there. On the other hand, German Americans favored the Central Powers. Another aspect is many Irish Americans resented British rule in Ireland, so they're going to hate the Allied powers. And Russian Jewish immigrants did not want to be allied with the Tsar because of pogroms, of course. Germany ceased submarine attacks in 1915 after Woodrow Wilson's threat. However, in 1917, Germany was so desperate to end the stalemate that in February, they announced they would continue unrestricted warfare. Wilson denounced Germany as being an evil country. And yeah, that totally hurts their morale. Oh, I'm hurt by your words. Yada, yada. Zimmerman telegram. So another part of your test question, remember I said it had to do with America. So I think one of the test questions is what are the two events that bring America into the war? So you have one, the sinking of the Lusitania, and two, the Zimmerman telegram. So also in 1917, British officials intercepted a message from the German foreign minister, Arthur Zimmerman, to his ambassador in Mexico. And in the note, Zimmerman authorized his ambassador to propose to the Mexican government that Germany would help Mexico, quote, reconquer the lost territory, New Mexico, Texas, Arizona, in return for Mexican support against the United States. Now, if you remember from eighth grade history, 8th grade U.S. history, you'll know the Mexican-American War. The U.S. won, and they got land called the Mexican Cession, and they gained all the land from Mexico, California, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, all that, Colorado. So they want that land back. So if they want that land back, Germany's saying, hey, I got a deal for you. You fight America, we will make sure that once we're done here in Europe, we're going to get you that land. Britain revealed this Zimmerman note to the American government. When the note became public, there was anti-German feelings intensifying all across the United States, as anything would. And in April, Wilson asked Congress to declare war on Germany. So they feel the threat that Mexico and Germany are creating an alliance to invade the United States. And they kind of already had an attack, they kind of attacked America by the sinking of Lusitania, killing 128 Americans. So here you have, this is supposed to be Zimmerman, and he's writing something. Here you have Lusitania, and here's Uncle Sam saying, all right, you want to fight? Anyways, America in the war. After the declaration, the U.S. needed months to train, recruit, and supply and transport a whole modern army across the Atlantic. And that was a treacherous thing because you got German subs patrolling the waters in the Atlantic. So they're very close. And I believe there are some instances of German submarines surfacing in like New York Harbor in almost near off the coast of, I want to say like North Carolina or Georgia. You know, there are some sightings of submarines out there that they are, patrolling and I guess you could say spying, seeing what's happening. So 1918, 2 million American soldiers had joined the war-weary Allied troops fighting along the Western Front. Although relatively few Americans engaged in combat, their arrival gave a much-needed morale boost. And just as important to the debt-ridden Allies was American financial aid. Because we weren't in the war. I mean, we kind of were supplying war materials to Britain. And then, you have the Lusitanians. So we're like, we don't really want to. But then we want to. And you have something called the Lend-Lease Act. And we're like, okay. And then that happened. They're like, So, America's got money. We had money. All right. 14 points. So though he failed to maintain American neutrality, Wilson still hoped to be a peacemaker. In January 1918, he issued something called the 14 points, which was his list of terms for resolving the war and future wars. In it, he's going to call for the freedom of the seas, free trade, large-scale reduction of arms, and end to secret treaties. Wilson favored the right of self-determination, which is the right of the people to choose their own governments. Finally, he wanted a general association of nations to keep the peace. So here's the 14th Amendment. 14th Amendment. The 14 points. What am I thinking? Counterattack. So a final showdown on the Western Front began early 1918. Germans wanted to get a decisive victory before the Americans showed up. In March, Germans launched a huge offensive that by July they had pushed the Allies back 40 miles. This has been like the largest gap, the largest push, the largest retreat in years. 40 miles is a lot, okay? I believe it's, what is it? I don't know how far 40 miles would be from here. Was that like from Fremont to like Tracy? Maybe more to Manteca? Imagine being forced to march. Not forced to march, but like retreating, running for your life. 40 miles. This is going to actually exhaust the German troops because they had been fighting. You can almost say the German troops have been fighting since 1914. This is 1918, 4 years later. The people who are still living, okay, they could have been transported from France to Russia, back to France, okay? They're going to be tired. So the Allies are going to counterattack, driving Germans slowly back and out of France and Belgium. In September, commanders told the Kaiser that war could not be won. So Armistice ends the fighting. So uprisings exploded all over Germany. Commanders advised the Kaiser to step down. Wilhelm II did flee to exile in the Netherlands in November. By autumn, Austria-Hungary had been reeling towards a collapse. As the government teetered and tottered, going back and forth, nationalists revolted, splintering the empire of the Habsburgs to no more existence. Bulgaria and the Ottoman Empire are going to ask for peace as well. So this new German government sought an armistice, which is an agreement to end the fighting. This is key. The armistice ends the fighting, okay, with the Allies. So this is actually coming up soon. Past, my bad. Get your days right, Mr. Obaye. So at 11/11/1918, the 11th month, the 11th day, at the 11th hour, the armistice was signed and the Great War had ended. The fighting stopped. In the 11th hour, the 11th day, the 11th month, it is time to remember peace. And that's where you get Veterans Day. Okay. So making the peace, that's for tomorrow, for you guys to learn about tomorrow. So hopefully you did enjoy that. Yeah, it was a little bit longer, and you could almost say it ended kind of quickly. Again, we're not going through all the battles of the war. Just know that the main ideas of the war, kind of with morale in the dumps, the injection of U.S. troops to help fight the Germans in Europe actually helped the Allied powers. And an armistice is an agreement to stop fighting. There's no real winner. There's no real loser. Okay? So that's key to understand for tomorrow. All right? So hopefully you guys did enjoy. Your homework is page 369. 369, page 369, 3 through 6. So yeah, as always, stay safe, wash your hands. Peace.